The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everybody to this 10-minute podcast where I'm going to share with you a few of my thoughts on managing the school budget. To help you understand my role, I will take a few moments to describe the context of my school, as this will help you to understand the nature of my role. I'm a school business manager in a two-form entry primary academy where over 60% of the children have English as an additional language. The eligibility for free school meals is approximately 25%. There are 420 pupils and 80 staff, and other initiatives we are involved in are we are a lead school for Teaching School Alliance. We're also a national support school and a provider of school-based initial teacher training known as SKIT. So as you can imagine, the role and responsibilities are very varied, and I hope in the next 10 minutes I manage to convey to you just how important it is to understand each of the initiatives the Academy is involved in and how each generates its own income source and has very specific expenditure relating to it. The Academy gets the majority of its funding from the Education Funding Agency, and this is calculated based on pupil numbers and various deprivation factors. All of this income is credited to one ledger code and cost centre, as it is not necessary for me to account for this in any more detail. If any analysis is required comparing the amount we receive from one year to the next, I prepare this comparison when I receive the detailed calculations, usually in about March. For those of you who may not have seen the general annual grant calculations, which is applicable for academies only, or the school budget share calculations for maintained schools only, then it might be worth asking if you can see a copy, as it will help you to understand all the different factors that contribute to the funding your school is allocated. I tend to spend more time trying to understand the other income streams that my school has, and most importantly, when we are expecting to receive them. The larger income sources will be coded to separate cost centre and a separate ledger code to make monitoring of the income and also the expenditure far easier. So for example, all the income we receive from the trainees who are training to become teachers in our SKIT is coded to its own cost centre and ledger code, so I can easily see how much has been received and from who. By understanding when I am expecting to receive it during the year, for example 25% in October and February and 50% in May, I am able to profile the budget to match. So if I am monitoring the accounts in November and have a variance on my SKIT income, I know that I should have received 25% from each trainee. I need only look at one ledger code to identify which trainees have paid and therefore identify who I need to contact to chase for payment. If I had coded this income stream to a general other income ledger code, it would be far harder to monitor, as the variance would have been masked by other income streams coded to the same ledger code. So by ensuring all expenditure for each of the different initiatives is coded to separate cost centres, this will help with the monitoring process in keeping track of expenditure. So for example, most trainees receive a bursary from the National College for Teaching and Leadership, that's the NCTL, and the Academy is given this funding from the NCTL, and we need to pay this to each of the trainees over a monthly period. By coding the income and expenditure to the same cost centre, but yet with different ledger codes, this again helps the monitoring and tracking of these funds. Each SKIT has an Ofsted inspection, which is totally separate to the school or the academy, and as such the finances are the same. So the other week I had an auditor spend a day with me looking at how I track, monitor and report on the finances of the SKIT, and then I was sent a report with a final grading. Luckily we gained the highest grade of high assurance, but that was all due to the systems and processing being tightly controlled and monitored. Each month I prepare management accounts for the Academy, which are uploaded onto a secure section of the school website so that trustees can view them and ask questions, rather than have to wait until the termly trustee meeting, when I present the latest accounts. The system reports generated are very detailed and have too much information for the trustees, so I have to prepare a summary report so that they are easily able to read and understand the information presented to them. Before I am able to investigate any variances, I need to know that the budget I have entered has been profiled correctly. So for example, if I take a budget for £10,000 for gas for the year and then profile this evenly over 12 months, this will not reflect the actual usage. Our school aims not to use the heating between the months of May to September, so obviously our expenditure will be far lower during these months. I therefore ensure the budget is split so that the months when we are using the heating will have a higher amount profiled compared to the months when we are not using it. This enables me to look at the variances and understand that the reason will not relate to budget profiling. So if the gas account is much higher in January, for example, it might be following investigation that I discover the caretaker forgot to switch the heating off over the 2-week Christmas break, so this would account for the genuine overspend. Having identified why a variance has arisen, it is then my job to try and put procedures in place to ensure it doesn't happen again. If I don't speak to the staff concerned, it is very likely the same thing will happen during the next holiday period. It did take me a year to really understand all of the contracts that the Academy has: grounds maintenance, cleaning, boiler, fire and intruder alarm servicing. By taking each one in turn and really delving into the finer detail, I was able to make savings when the opportunity arose to renew the contracts. Having carried out this exercise and prepared the budget for the coming year, it then made it much easier for me to monitor and report on expenditure that following year. So when seeking approval from trustees for the budget, knowing how I have arrived at the figures really helps me to evaluate it and explain it to them. Again, this has been a learning curve. So if you are relatively new in your post, don't feel daunted that you might not understand the exact nature of all of the budget headings. One really useful exercise is to carry out a benchmarking exercise with other similar schools. And we do this so that we can compare various expenditure headings to see if, for example, our teacher cost per pupil is similar to other schools. This exercise always comes with a health warning, which is why it is vital to understand your budget and actual figures. When we converted to an academy, we had a 17-month financial year in our first year, so that we would be aligned for the 1st of September start date in our second year. Academies have no choice with this start date for the financial year. So imagine the horror of doing a benchmarking exercise against similar academies who only had a 12-month reporting period. Obviously, our costs were far higher, but easily explained to trustees as I knew exactly how our data had been put together. Now, in terms of cash management, I am lucky as our reserves are very healthy, so I need not worry about the bank account becoming overdrawn. I have, however, set up a current account that sweeps any surplus funds to the savings account overnight, or if it is showing as going to be overdrawn as cheques are waiting to be cashed, then funds are automatically swept from the savings account into the current account overnight. So with a large construction project in progress at the moment, I have had to advise the bank that large cheques are going to be presented regularly so that they are aware and cash them without any querying. I have found it really useful to have a named person at the bank who I can email or phone directly just to advise of any queries or unusual activities taking place. So for example, we pay the phone bill by direct debit, yet one month the invoice was double what it should have been due to the provider making an error. I knew that this would take months to resolve with the company, so by calling the bank and stopping the direct debit going out, I knew that the company would be far more motivated to resolve the query if they were the ones chasing the funds. Another area I was aware of monitoring is the different types of funds. All income and expenditure will fall into either revenue or capital. I ensure that the DFCG, which is the Devolved Formula Capital Grant, is kept in a totally separate cost centre and ledger codes, and I always ensure that income is credited to one account and expenditure in another. If I coded them to the same account, this would be like netting them off, which is not the correct accounting treatment. When explaining and presenting to trustees, it is always the revenue budget they are more interested in. The reason, I believe, is that capital income and expenditure is very often ring-fenced, so can only be spent on specific items. As long as this is the case and can be evidenced, then the trustees are happy to sign off the budgets. I hope you have found this podcast interesting, and it may have given you some ideas about managing your own budget. I think the one area that I continually need to be aware of is the varying level of expertise of budget holders. There are about 20 members of staff who are given budgets to be responsible for each year, and the level of financial understanding varies considerably between them. This always causes an issue with some budgets being overspent. I am really trying to tackle this in the next academic year and have asked for a half-hour slot on the first inset day in September to talk to these members of staff about how best to manage their budget. So hopefully I will have fewer issues to resolve next academic year. Thank you for listening.